So I was looking through our collection of sources for today, and one name really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah.
Abdulrazak Gurnah,
Wow.
a Nobel Prize winner.
Absolutely.
And I thought, wow, what a fascinating deep dive this is going to be to really get into the heart of his novels and
Yeah.
to understand those big ideas he keeps coming back
Yeah.
to. Migration,
Mm.
identity.
Phew.
You know how history shapes us even today?
Yeah, I mean, his work is so powerful because it speaks to something so universal,
Absolutely.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Abdulrazak Gurnah, just so everyone knows, is a Tanzanian-British novelist.
Right.
And it's really interesting because his own life
Yeah.
as a refugee from Zanzibar
Right.
really infuses his writing with this incredible authenticity.
Mm.
And, the Nobel Prize Committee recognized that.
Yeah.
They recognized his profound examination of colonialism's impact
Yeah.
and the really difficult realities that refugees face.
Right. And for this deep dive, we're going to be focusing on Dr. Jaswant Rathod's discussion of Gurnah's major works.
It's a great resource.
Yeah, it is.
Really gives you a concise overview
Yeah.
of each of the novels,
Yeah.
the stories, the themes,
Right.
and why Gurnah's work is so important.
Right. And I think what I find so compelling about this is that we're not just talking about, analyzing books. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
These narratives that he's created, they really immerse us
Yeah.
in those human experiences
Yeah.
of being uprooted,
Yeah.
the need to belong, the influence of history on our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that this deep dive will give you a much richer understanding of those things.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
With Gurnah's first novel, Memory of Departure, published in 1987.
Okay.
It introduces us to Hassan, a young man living in a troubled African country.
Mm-hmm.
And his biggest goal is to escape. Escape the poverty.
Yeah.
Escape what sounds like a really difficult family life.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, what's so striking about Hassan's situation is how bleak it is right from the start.
Right.
His father is abusive. He's an alcoholic.
Right.
Hassan is unfairly blamed for the accidental death of his brother. Sad.
Right.
So already, you can see how he's desperate to get out of this environment.
Yeah, and he puts so much hope
He does.
in his wealthy uncle in Nairobi.
Yeah. Bwana Ahmed.
Yeah, but that ends in a humiliating rejection.
It does. It really does. And that rejection kind of sends him spiraling back down.
Right back to where he started.
To the very circumstances he's trying to flee.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and this novel really gets at that post-colonial disillusionment.
What does that mean?
Well, it refers to that sense of disappointment
Okay.
that followed independence of a lot of nations.
Okay.
Because the progress,
Yeah.
economic and social,
Yeah.
that many had hoped for
Right.
simply didn't materialize.
Right.
So for many individuals,
Yeah.
like Hassan, they felt trapped
Right.
in this cycle of poverty and hardship.
Yeah, you would think that that level of disappointment
I know.
would just crush him.
Yeah, totally.
But it doesn't stop him.
No, it doesn't.
He eventually gets a job working on a ship.
Yeah,
It's a small step,
it is.
but it says so much about his resilience.
Absolutely. And it's that resilience that really pushes the narrative forward.
Right.
And it really connects to this broader theme of, survival in the face of these immense challenges.
So Memory of Departure really sets the stage
It does.
for a lot of what Gurnah will explore in his later works.
Yeah.
The themes of displacement, the search for opportunity,
Yeah.
the lasting effects of colonialism.
Exactly. And the way he writes about it is so powerful.
Yeah, Dr. Rathod actually mentions that his language is raw
Yeah.
and often brutal,
Yeah.
which really reflects, I think, the harsh realities
It does.
that Hassan is facing.
Absolutely. It's unflinching
Yeah.
and really draws you into that world.
So moving on to his next novel, Pilgrim's Way,
Right.
published just a year later in 1988.
Okay.
This one introduces us to Dodd, a Tanzanian immigrant living in Canterbury, England in the 1970s.
All right.
And he's carrying this heavy burden
He is.
from the political turmoil that he fled.
Right.
And he's also facing racism
Yes.
in his new country.
It's a lot to bear.
It is. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting about this is that he tries to conceal his past.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, like he wants to, start fresh or something.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think about the things that we carry with us.
Yeah.
When we leave one place and try to build a new life.
Right, exactly. And it's his relationship with a nurse named Catherine that really pushes him
It does.
to confront his past, to, tell those stories of his upbringing and his difficult journey.
To England.
Yeah.
It's a powerful moment in the book.
It is, and it makes me wonder if, maybe Gurnah is suggesting that we can't really escape our past.
Right. They will always catch up with us in some way.
Exactly. And the title, Pilgrim's Way.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
It is a great title.
Because it's not just about that physical journey from Tanzania to England.
It's about that internal pilgrimage.
Right.
The journey of self-discovery and reconciliation.
With the past.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's not an easy journey.
Well.
It's filled with pain and struggle.
And I think, for the listener, this idea of a pilgrimage can be applied to so many different aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. It's about confronting those difficult parts of ourselves and trying to find a way to move forward.
And this novel really explores those themes.
It does.
Of immigration.
Yeah.
The impact of memory. The complexities of identity in a foreign land.
Right. And it also doesn't shy away from the reality of racism.
Right.
In English society at that time.
So Gurnah's not pulling any punches here.
No. He's really showing us the challenges that immigrants face.
And I think that's so important.
It's about giving voice to those experiences.
Okay, so let's move on to Dottie.
Okay.
Published in 1990.
All right.
And this one is really interesting because it introduces us to Dottie Balfour, a young Black woman born in Leeds, England.
Okay.
So she's not an immigrant in the traditional sense.
Like she's second generation?
Exactly. But she's still navigating this really complex space of identity and belonging.
And what makes Dottie's story so compelling is her mixed ancestry.
Okay.
She has roots in Afghanistan, Punjab, and Africa.
Wow. So it's really a mix.
It is. And despite being born in England,
she
knows very little about her family's history.
And why is that?
Well, her mother never really talked about the past.
So there's this silence.
Yeah, a real sense of mystery surrounding her heritage.
That's so interesting.
And after her mother dies, she's left to care for her younger siblings.
Oh, wow.
And they're living in poverty.
Right.
Facing racism.
Yeah, it's a lot for a young woman to handle.
It is. And it raises questions about what it means to belong.
Yeah.
When you're born in a country, but you don't feel fully accepted.
Right. And for Dottie, it's through books that she starts to find herself.
Right. She finds solace and understanding in literature.
It's so powerful.
It speaks to the power of stories.
Yeah.
To help us connect with ourselves.
And with the world around us.
Exactly. And for Dottie, it's a way to challenge the stereotypes she faces.
Right.
And to build her own sense of identity.
So even though she may not know all the details of her family's past, she's finding a different kind of connection through literature.
Through the power of stories.
And I think for the listener, it's a reminder that we can find ourselves in unexpected places.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it's the stories of others that help us understand our own.
Okay, so moving on to one of his most celebrated novels. Paradise.
Okay.
Published in 1994. And this one takes us back in time.
It does.
To early 20th century East Africa during German colonization.
Right.
And it introduces us to Yusuf.
Yeah.
A young boy who's sold into servitude.
To pay off his father's debts.
Yeah, what a start.
It's a powerful opening, isn't it?
It is.
And what's so striking about Paradise is the way that Gurnah portrays pre-colonial East Africa.
Okay.
You get this sense of the beauty of the landscape, the social and religious dynamics.
Right.
And it's all set against this backdrop of encroaching colonialism.
Right. So you're seeing that shift happening.
Exactly. You witness it through Yusuf's eyes.
As he travels with his master, Uncle Aziz, into the interior.
And it's a journey of discovery for him.
In a lot of ways.
But it's also a journey that exposes him to some harsh realities.
What do you mean?
Well, he sees the exploitation, the violence, the impact of the colonial presence.
And the title Paradise feels very ironic.
It does, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Because you have this idyllic setting.
Right.
But there's this underlying sense of loss.
Of innocence.
Yeah.
As colonialism takes hold.
Exactly. And, it was actually shortlisted for the Booker Prize.
Wow.
Which is a huge honor.
It is, and it really speaks to the power of this novel.
Yeah, it's a beautifully written and thought-provoking work.
And I think it also raises this question about the legacies of colonialism and how they continue to shape the world today.
Absolutely. It's a theme that resonates throughout Gurnah's work.
Yeah.
And it's a theme that we can't ignore.
Okay, so moving on to Admiring Silence,
Okay.
published in 1996.
All right.
This one tells the story of a Zanzibari man who flees to England in the 1960s.
Okay.
And he builds a life there.
He does.
He becomes a teacher, marries an English woman named Emma.
Right.
They have a daughter.
Yeah.
But there's this big thing that's missing.
What's that?
He doesn't tell his wife and daughter about his past.
Yeah, he keeps it a secret.
Yeah, and it's not just that he's not talking about it.
Right.
He's actively constructing a different narrative. His family back in Zanzibar.
It's like he's living a double life.
It is, and it's so interesting because it makes you wonder, can you ever really separate those parts of yourself?
Right. Can you truly compartmentalize your identity like that?
Exactly, and after 2 decades, he returns to Zanzibar.
Wow. So he's going back to confront his past.
Yeah, and the consequences of his choices.
It must be a really difficult moment.
It is, and it's really about, reckoning with who he is.
Yeah, and facing those he left behind.
And this novel really explores those themes of exile, cultural dislocation, the tension between past and present.
And that feeling of alienation.
Yeah, like you don't belong anywhere.
Exactly. And Dr. Rathod points out that silence is a key theme here.
Right? Because it's not just the absence of speech.
No.
It's a deliberate strategy.
Right. It's a way of protecting himself.
Right.
But it also ends up isolating him.
And causing even more pain.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
And it really highlights the complexities of identity formation.
Especially for those who have experienced displacement and trauma.
And Admiring Silence really captures that struggle.
It does. And I think for the listener, it's a reminder that our pasts shape who we are, whether we acknowledge them or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to By the Sea.
Okay.
Published in 2001.
All right.
And this one brings together 2 Zanzibari refugees,
Okay.
Salah Omar and Latif Mahmoud in England.
Okay.
And it's under these really unexpected circumstances.
What do you mean?
Well, they don't seem to know each other at first, but they share a deeply intertwined history.
Oh, wow.
Back in Zanzibar, marked by betrayal.
And misunderstanding.
So there's this hidden connection.
There is, and it's slowly revealed as the novel unfolds.
And how does Gurnah structure the narrative?
It's really interesting, actually, because it alternates between their perspectives.
So you're getting both sides of the story.
Yeah, and it's like you're piecing together this puzzle of their shared past and the reasons for their exile.
And it really emphasizes the subjective nature of memory, doesn't it?
It does.
Because you're seeing the same events from completely different viewpoints.
And I think it also raises questions about the nature of truth.
Yeah, because whose version do we believe?
Right. And is there even a single objective truth?
It makes you think about how we construct our own narratives based on our own experiences.
And memories.
Right.
Which might not always be reliable.
Exactly. And By the Sea also gives us a glimpse into that tumultuous period of post-independence violence in Zanzibar.
The events that forced so many to flee.
Including Salah and Latif.
Exactly.
So their personal stories are very much connected to those larger historical events.
It's a powerful reminder that our lives are shaped by forces beyond our control.
And that history is never really that far behind us.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on to Desertion.
Right.
Published in 2005.
Okay.
And this one takes a much broader sweep.
It does.
It tells 2 interconnected love stories.
Oh, wow.
Across generations and continents.
All right. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it begins in 1899.
Wow. Okay.
With the arrival of an injured Englishman, Martin Pierce, in an East African coastal town.
Right.
And he falls in love with Rahana, who is the sister of a local shopkeeper.
So forbidden romance.
It is.
Yeah.
And then the narrative jumps forward to the late 1950s.
Right before Zanzibar's independence.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we see another love affair between Amin, who's Rahana's granddaughter, and Jamila, a woman involved in anti-colonial activism.
Wow. So these 2 love stories are separated by decades.
Yeah, but they're connected by family and by history.
And by those themes of forbidden love.
Exactly.
I see.
And it's so fascinating to see how colonialism, cultural shifts, historical events impact these very personal relationships.
They do. And it's a reminder that history isn't just something in a textbook.
Right.
It's something that lives and breathes in our own families.
Absolutely.
And it shapes our own relationships.
So desertion really emphasizes that interconnectedness.
It does, and it does so in such a beautifully written way.
Right. So moving on to The Last Gift,
right,
published in 2011.
Okay.
And this one centers around a boss, an aging East African immigrant living in England who suffers a stroke.
Oh, wow. So he's facing his own mortality.
He is. And as he does, he starts recording his life story. Okay.
And reveals a long-held secret.
Wow. So the past is coming back to haunt him.
It is.
Even as he's nearing the end of his life.
Right. And it's not just him who's grappling with this.
Right.
His wife, Miriam, becomes determined to uncover the truth.
And their children, too.
Yeah. Anna and Jamal, they've grown up in Britain.
Right. So they're kind of caught between two worlds.
They are, and they're trying to understand their own identities and their connection to their family's hidden history.
It's such a universal theme, isn't it?
It is.
That desire to know where we come from and understand the stories that have shaped our families.
Exactly. And this novel also really captures the challenges faced by immigrant families, trying to reconcile their past with their present.
In a new cultural context.
And I think for the listener, this is a reminder that families are complex.
They are.
And often hold secrets.
Yeah. And sometimes uncovering those secrets
can be painful.
But it can also be a path to healing.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on to Gravel Heart,
Laureate,
published in 2017.
Okay.
This one introduces us to Salim, growing up in Zanzibar in the 1970s.
Right.
And he has this really difficult relationship.
He does.
With his father.
It's strained.
It is. And when his uncle offers him a chance to go to London for college, it seems like an escape.
Right.
But his experience there is far from easy.
What happens?
Well, he faces a lot of challenges.
Okay.
He's not used to the cold.
Right.
He feels isolated. And he starts to uncover some really devastating truths.
About his family.
About his family's past.
That explains a lot.
It does.
About his upbringing.
Yeah, and the title Gravel Heart.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
What does it refer to?
Well, Dr. Rathod mentions that it's a reference to Shakespeare.
Oh, okay.
And it really speaks to Salim's emotional numbness.
Right.
And his feeling of not belonging.
Anywhere.
Anywhere.
He's lost.
He is. And I think, for the listener, this novel really highlights the psychological effects of exile.
Yeah.
And how those can manifest.
Right. It's not just about the physical journey.
No, it's about the emotional journey as well.
Exactly. And the scars that we carry with us.
And Gravel Heart is set in the years following Zanzibar's independence.
Right.
So it's also exploring those changes that are happening.
In the country.
In the country, yeah.
And how they're impacting individuals.
Okay, so moving on to Afterlives.
Okay.
Published in 2020.
All right.
And this one takes us back to colonial East Africa.
It does.
During German rule.
Okay.
And World War I.
All right.
So there's some overlap here.
There is.
Thematically with Paradise.
Right. Both dealing with that colonial period.
Excellent.
And the impact on East Africa.
And Afterlives focuses on Ilyas, Afia, and Hamza, whose lives are intertwined.
Okay.
And what's really striking about this novel is the direct portrayal of colonial violence.
Right.
So Ilyas is stolen by German troops as a boy.
It's a brutal reality.
It is.
That's true.
And Afia, his sister, is left to face hardship.
It's a lot for her to endure.
It is. And Hamza returns from the war.
Yeah.
Deeply scarred.
So the war has taken its toll on him.
It has.
Both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And I think what's so powerful about this novel is that it doesn't shy away from the human cost of colonialism and war.
It forces us to confront those realities.
It does.
Yeah, and yet, despite all of the suffering, there's also this sense of resilience.
There is.
Yeah.
It's about the strength of the human spirit to endure.
And to find hope.
Even in the darkest of times.
So Afterlives is a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense adversity, there's always the possibility for renewal.
Absolutely. It's a testament to human resilience.
And finally, we have Gurnah's most recent novel, Theft.
Okay. Published in 2025.
Right.
And this one takes us to Tanzania in the 1990s, a time of significant global change.
Right.
And it follows the coming-of-age stories of 3 young individuals.
Okay.
Kareem, Fauzia, and Badar.
Right.
whose lives become intertwined.
And what are the big themes in this one?
Well, it's really about the legacies, both personal and historical, that these young people are grappling with in this new era of increasing tourism and technology in Tanzania.
So the world is changing around them.
It is, and the title, Theft.
Yeah, it's intriguing.
I thought so too.
What does it refer to?
Well, it suggests, I think, a deeper exploration of the ways in which things are taken.
Okay.
Not just materially, but also emotionally.
Interesting.
Yeah, within relationships and across society.
So it's about those more subtle forms of loss.
Exactly.
Well, I see.
And as these characters navigate their own journeys...
they're also contending with these broader societal shifts.
Right, trying to find their place in a rapidly changing world.
And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to.
Absolutely. It's a universal experience.
So to sum up, I think what's so powerful about Gurnah's work is that he explores these multifaceted experiences of migration, exile, the impact of colonialism, the complexities of identity,
the weight of history,
and the search for belonging.
And he does it with such empathy and insight.
He does.
And I think what's so profound about his narratives is that they offer these deep insights into the human condition. You know, they resonate with anyone who has grappled with change, identity, or the legacies of the past.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider.
I'm listening.
How do the hidden histories and unspoken traumas within our own families and societies continue to shape our lives and our identities?
It's something to think about.
It is, even across generations and vast geographical distances.
It's powerful.
It is, and what stories remain untold. And how might uncovering them change our understanding of ourselves and others?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with.
It is. I hope it sparks some reflection.
Me too.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the works of Abdulrazak Gurnah.
It was my pleasure.
I'm glad you could be here.
Thanks for having me. Today we are going to take a closer look at the works of Abdulrazak Gurnah.
Oh, fantastic.
Now, he is a pretty prominent voice in contemporary literature.
Yes, he is.
And especially when it comes to sort of exploring these post-colonial experiences, you know, the impact of colonialism and what happens afterward.
Right.
So we've got a really interesting analysis of his work, actually, that goes through a lot of the key themes that we see throughout his books.
Okay, sounds good.
And really what we want to try and do in this deep dive is get to the heart of, you know, what are those core ideas that Gurnah is really wrestling with?
Yes.
And why is his work so significant to the world of literature and, you know, especially in giving us insights into the post-colonial world?
Yeah.
Which is still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
And also that experience of displacement.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something that so many people around the world are experiencing.
Definitely. And it's something that runs through so much of Gurnah's work.
Exactly, yeah.
Like a thread connecting these human experiences across different times and places. It's not just a passing interest for him. It's a deep engagement with what it means to live through and after those really significant shifts.
Right.
Colonialism, displacement. You can feel that weight in his writing.
Okay, so I think a good place to start would be with one of the most fundamental elements of his writing, and that's this idea of colonialism.
Yeah, colonialism, absolutely.
It seems like so much of what he explores sort of flows from this historical reality.
It really does. You can't separate Gurnah's work from the history of colonialism. He's saying, look, this isn't just something that happened in the past. It's a legacy that people are still living with, you know? And you see this so clearly in novels like Paradise, Desertion, even Afterlives.
And I like how you pointed out those titles, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because even in the titles themselves, we see this sort of before, during, and after.
Yeah, the lasting impact
of imperial control.
Yeah, it's all there in the titles.
Specifically in East Africa, right?
Right.
Which is where a lot of his work is set.
Exactly. So you get the sense of a long historical arc, but it's not told like a dry history textbook, is it? It's personal. It's about people.
Yeah, and it's not a history book, right? It's not like looking at these big political movements in the way that a historian might.
Right.
It's much more focused, I think, on the individuals.
It is, and that's what I find so powerful about his approach. The analysis calls it intimate experiences of ordinary individuals.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's really it. He's not giving you the grand narrative of history. He's zeroing in on these individual lives, the ones that history books often overlook. And in doing so, he reveals these subtle power dynamics.
Yes.
The disruption of societies and the lasting legacy of these colonial structures. You see how it impacts people on a very personal level.
It's not just these sort of big abstract ideas. It's like real people's lives being affected.
And it makes you question what you thought you knew about history. It's not black and white. It's complex. And he's really careful to avoid those simplistic stereotypes.
Yeah, and he avoids those kind of like easy stereotypes that we often see when talking about these kinds of things.
Right.
How does he manage to avoid that, do you think?
Well, he's so good at digging into the complexity of human motivations on both sides, the colonizer and the colonized. He shows how colonialism impacted everyone, how it subtly shifted people's worldviews, their beliefs, their identities. It wasn't just brute force, it was a creeping influence that seeped into the fabric of society. And that's what makes his work so powerful and thought-provoking. It's not a simple good versus evil story. It's about the messy reality of how people navigate these systems and how they're changed by them.
And so naturally, I think that leads us to this other major theme that we see throughout Gurnah's work, and that's displacement.
Displacement.
It's almost like a direct consequence.
You could say that.
Of colonialism.
It often is.
In a lot of these narratives.
Yes. Displacement in all its forms is a constant presence in Gurnah's work. And it's not just about physical movement. It's about the forced migrations, the economic hardship, the scars left by colonialism and war.
Yeah.
You see this explored in novels like Pilgrim's Way and Memory of Departure, but it's also there in so many of his short stories.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about with the short stories.
We do.
Because there are quite a few of them that deal with this.
There are.
So we've got Cages, Bossy, Escort, My Mother Lived on a Farm in Africa, The Arriver's Tale, and The Stateless Person's Tale.
It's a recurring theme, for sure.
Yeah, so clearly this is something that is really central to his work.
Absolutely.
What aspects of this do you find particularly compelling?
I think, for me, it's the psychological and emotional impact he portrays. It's not just about packing your bags and going somewhere new. It's about the feeling of alienation, the loss of home, the struggle to belong in this new environment. And often these are unfamiliar.
Yeah, and hostile environments.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the analysis makes this great point about how Gurnah's own experience as a refugee adds so much authenticity to his portrayal of displacement. You can feel that lived experience in his writing.
It's like he's not just
observing it from the outside.
Imagining it.
Yeah, he's been there. It's part of him. And he digs deep into that feeling of rootlessness, always being between two worlds, and the challenges of navigating these new cultural landscapes while carrying the weight of the past. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those short stories in detail.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think they really provide these unique windows into displacement.
They do?
So let's start with Cages.
Okay.
Now, this is about a migrant named Hamid. And he spends most of his time inside a shop.
Right. He really leaves.
Yeah, he really leaves, which is already interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the title is so powerful.
Oh, the imagery is striking.
Cages.
Yeah.
What does that evoke for you when you think about?
The analysis interprets it as a kind of multi-layered confinement.
Right.
And I think that's spot on. There's the physical cage of the shop itself, where Hamid spends most of his time. But then there's this larger cage, this social and emotional confinement.
Oh, I see.
He's isolated. He's on the fringes of this new society, not fully able to participate or connect. So you've got this external cage and this internal cage, and they both contribute to this sense of being trapped.
And I think that feeling of being trapped is something that a lot of people who are displaced feel.
Absolutely. It's like you're caught between worlds, belonging nowhere and everywhere all at once.
Now, we also have Bossy.
Okay, Bossy.
And we don't have a detailed summary of that one.
No.
But the analysis suggests it probably explores similar themes to Cages.
Yeah, it's likely. And the title itself kind of makes you think about power dynamics, right? Being displaced often puts you in a vulnerable position.
Absolutely.
Navigating unfamiliar systems and social structures, maybe facing prejudice.
Right.
So Bossy could be about those power imbalances, maybe dealing with authorities, employers, even personal relationships where those dynamics come into play.
Right, because you're often at the mercy
of
other people.
Exactly.
in that situation.
You have to rely on others, and that can create these power imbalances. Whether they're intentional or not, that power dynamic is there.
Now, we also have escort.
Okay, escort.
Which takes a slightly different angle.
It does.
It focuses on a teacher who's returning to Tanzania.
Right.
And specifically his interactions with the taxi driver.
Okay, interesting.
And what the analysis points out here is this subtle exploration of belonging.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not even about someone being displaced to a new country.
Yeah.
It's about someone returning to their own homeland.
Right, but still feeling a sense of displacement.
Right.
Like they no longer fully belong.
Yeah. And that idea that you can leave your home.
You can.
And even if you go back, you're not the same person.
You're changed. And the place you left has changed, too.
Yeah.
So there's this gap, this distance that you might not be able to bridge.
Yeah.
Escort seems to be exploring that sense of not belonging, even when you're back in a familiar place.
And I think that taxi driver is probably a really key.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
That relationship, those interactions, likely reveal so much about the teacher's internal struggle with identity and belonging. He's seeing his own culture with new eyes after being away.
Right.
And that can be both enlightening and disorienting.
Yeah, and then my mother lived on a farm in Africa. Shifts our focus a bit.
Okay.
To the aftermath of the Zanzibar revolution.
Right, a very specific historical event.
Yes, and the identity crises that happened within the diaspora.
So we're looking at how these major historical and political events can have a lasting impact on people's sense of identity, even generations later.
Even when they're living in a completely different place.
It speaks to the power of these events.
Yeah.
And how they can ripple through time and space, shaping individual and collective identities. And in the context of the diaspora, it's about this constant negotiation between the past and the present, that feeling of a lost homeland, a yearning for what was, and the struggle to reconcile that with the reality of their lives in a new culture. It's complex and often very painful.
Yeah. And then we've got the arriver's tale, which I think has a lot of resonance today.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly timely.
With everything going on in the world. And this one details a refugee's flight from persecution.
Right.
And the really difficult realities of the UK asylum process.
It's a story that puts a human face on the refugee crisis. It shows you the traumatic reasons why people flee their homes. In this case, it's persecution for opposing FGM. And then it takes you through the arduous process of seeking asylum in the UK.
Yeah.
The bureaucratic hurdles, the dehumanizing treatment, the constant uncertainty. It's a stark reminder of the challenges refugees face and the systems that often fail them.
And then the stateless person's tale focuses on someone who's detained for 12 years.
Wow, 12 years.
Without any identity document.
Oh my gosh. That's unimaginable.
It's a really powerful story.
It must be.
And it really highlights the vulnerability
Yeah.
of being stateless.
To be without a country, without recognition, it's like you don't exist.
It strips you of your basic rights.
It does. It raises huge questions about human rights and how we treat those who are most vulnerable.
Right. And that lack of recognition.
Yeah.
It's not just about paperwork.
No.
It's about your identity.
It's about being seen and acknowledged as a human being.
Right. And that naturally, I think, brings us to another major theme that we see throughout Gurnah's work.
Okay.
And that's identity.
Identity.
And it's really interesting how closely tied it is to the theme of displacement.
It's inseparable.
Gee.
You can't talk about one without the other. Because displacement so fundamentally shapes who you are.
Yeah.
It forces you to question everything you thought you knew about yourself.
Right. And so specifically, we see that in novels like Admiring Silence, Dottie, and Gravel Heart.
Right. And in these novels, we see how colonialism and migration disrupt identity.
Yeah.
It's like these forces tear at the fabric of who you are, leaving you with these fragmented, fluid identities.
Yeah, you're constantly trying to figure out
who you
are in this new context.
Yeah, it's like being caught between cultures,
right.
Not fully belonging to your past or your present.
Right, and the analysis talks about the importance of names and language.
Such important elements.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
Well, names and language are how we define ourselves and connect with others.
Right.
They're deeply tied to our sense of identity, our cultural heritage, our family histories. And when those are disrupted through migration, it can be really disorienting. It's like losing a piece of yourself.
Yeah, and the analysis even uses this phrase, cultural limbo.
Cultural limbo, yeah.
To describe what many of the characters
That's a great phrase.
are experiencing.
It is.
What do you think about that?
It captures that feeling of being in between,
Yeah.
not quite at home anywhere,
Yeah.
trying to reconcile your past and present.
Right.
And the analysis also mentions how silence can become a form of protection for these characters when language feels inadequate to bridge that gap between cultures.
Yeah, like you can't even put it into words.
You can't. Sometimes silence is the only way to protect that fragile sense of self.
And that actually makes me think about another theme that we see a lot in Gurnah's work.
Okay, what's that?
And that's memory.
Memory, yeah.
It's almost like memory becomes this link.
It is a link.
Back to your personal and your collective history.
It is. It's how we hold on to our past, our stories, our identities. And for those who are displaced, memory can be even more vital because so much else has been lost.
Yeah.
It's a way to stay connected to what's been left behind.
Right.
And you see this explored really beautifully in novels like By the Sea and The Last Gift, where memory is so central to the narrative.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is how Gurnah portrays memory.
Yeah, it's not straightforward, is it?
It's not this sort of perfect record of the past.
No, not at all. He's showing us that memory is unreliable.
Yeah.
It's selective, and it's deeply influenced by trauma and displacement. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about how memory works.
And the way he does that is by looking at both the individual's personal memories and then these larger historical narratives.
And how they intersect, sometimes clash.
Right, exactly.
So you've got these personal recollections that might contradict the official historical account, right? And that raises questions about whose story gets told, whose version of the past is considered valid. And in the context of displacement, this can be even more powerful because those personal memories often represent a challenge to dominant narratives, a way of reclaiming agency and giving voice to marginalized experiences.
And all of this really, I think, leads to that very fundamental theme of belonging.
Belonging.
It seems like that's something that runs through all of Gurnah's work.
It's this universal human need.
Yeah, that desire to be connected.
To feel connected to a place, a community, a family. It's a driving force for so many of his characters.
Right, and we see that very clearly in novels like Dottie Gravelheart.
Right.
And we even see it in Admiring Silence.
It's there too.
It's a constant struggle for his characters.
It is. And it's made even harder by the fact that they're often navigating these new, unfamiliar, and often unwelcoming environments.
Right, it's like a double whammy.
It is. You're trying to find your place in a world that doesn't always want you.
Yeah, you don't have those familiar touchstones.
No, you're starting over, often with very little support.
Right.
And Gurnah captures that feeling of being uprooted, alienated, unwanted.
Yeah.
So poignantly.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thread throughout his work.
It makes you think about how essential that sense of belonging is to our well-being as human beings.
So when we consider everything that we've talked about, these themes of colonialism, displacement, identity, memory, and belonging, how would you summarize the importance?
It's a lot to summarize, but I think what makes Gurnah's work so crucial is that he gives us these unique insights into the lived realities of post-colonial experiences. He's amplifying voices that are often marginalized or silenced, particularly those from Africa. He's challenging those dominant Western narratives and providing a more nuanced and complex understanding of this historical period.
Particularly when it comes to these refugee narratives.
Well, absolutely. He goes beyond those simplistic portrayals that we often see.
Like just reducing people to numbers or statistics.
He humanizes refugees.
He shows their resilience, their dignity, their individuality.
Right. He's showing the whole person.
He is. And the analysis mentions the significant scholarly recognition he's received, which is well-deserved.
Yeah, he is really highly regarded.
He is. And his work has sparked so much critical discussion about memory, identity, the legacy of colonialism. He's pushing the boundaries of how we think about these things.
And I think another thing that makes his work so compelling is his writing style.
Oh, yeah.
The analysis describes it as being understated but powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. It's not flashy prose, but it's incredibly effective.
Yeah, there's this simplicity to it.
There is, but it's a deceptive simplicity.
Right.
Because beneath the surface, there's this incredible depth and richness.
Yeah, it's like those sentences, really.
They build on each other, they accumulate, and they stay with you long after you've finished reading.
It's not about being
showy. It's about precision, about choosing the right words to create this powerful emotional impact.
And I think that's particularly true when you look at his use of first-person narration.
Oh, the first-person narration is crucial.
Yeah.
It allows us to really get inside the heads of these characters, to experience the world through their eyes, to feel their hopes, their fears, their uncertainties. It creates this incredible sense of intimacy and empathy, and it also highlights the subjective nature of truth.
Yeah, there's no one objective truth.
No, there isn't. It's about perspective.
Right.
About how our individual experiences shape how we see the world.
Right. And then he also uses these multiple perspectives.
Yes.
And these nonlinear timelines.
It's like he's mirroring the way memory works.
Right.
You know, it's not always chronological. It's fragmented. It jumps back and forth.
Yeah, messy.
It is messy, and that's what makes it so human.
Right.
And by using these techniques, Gurnah emphasizes how the past and present are constantly intertwined. It's not a clean break. It's this ongoing conversation between what was and what is.
And then finally, I think it's important to mention the way that he brings in these cultural references.
Oh, yeah. Those cultural elements are so enriching.
Like the Quranic stories.
Yes, and those add another layer of meaning to his work. They ground his characters in a specific cultural context.
Yeah.
They give us insight into their worldviews, their beliefs, their values. It's a reminder that these stories aren't happening in a vacuum.
Yeah. They're very much rooted in a specific place and time.
Exactly.
So ultimately, I think the significance of Gurnah's work goes beyond just telling a good story.
It does.
It's about giving us a deeper understanding of some of the most important issues facing our world today.
And he does it with such sensitivity and nuance.
Right.
His portrayal of African experiences under colonialism and in the post-colonial world, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
Especially his focus on the voices of refugees and displaced people. It's like he's shining a light on these experiences that are so often overlooked and forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about our world.
And what I find really powerful is that he's able to blend those personal histories with these broader social and political issues.
It's that intersection that makes his work so resonant.
Right, so it's not just
about individual lives. It's about the systems and structures that shape those lives.
Right, and the ways that those systems are failing people.
They are, and through his storytelling, he invites us to see the humanity in everyone, to empathize with those who are struggling, to understand the complexities of their experiences. He's not offering easy answers. He's asking us to engage with these difficult questions, to think critically about the world around us.
So as we finish this deep dive into Gurnah's work, I think the key takeaway is that his work is about so much more than just these individual themes.
It is.
That we've talked about.
It's about the interconnectedness of these themes, how colonialism leads to displacement, how displacement impacts identity, how memory shapes our understanding of the past and present.
And ultimately, it's all about that search for belonging.
Yes, that fundamental human desire to find your place in the world.
So as you go forward, I want you to think about how those themes that we've talked about resonate with what you see happening in the world today.
Yeah, it's so important.
We have these ongoing migration crises.
We do.
We have people struggling with their identities in this really complex...
In this globalized world.
Yeah, globalized world.
Yes.
And we can't forget about the impact of history on individuals and societies.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
And Gurnah's work is a powerful reminder of that.
So I hope this has given you a lot to think about. And we'll see you in the next deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Bye, everyone.